was told I have cancer and only 2 years to live. I told my husband's family what the doctor had just told me in the hospital's phone booth. I expected that they wouldn't say harsh words to a woman who had been told she had only a few years to live. But I was wrong.
Yay! I will get life insurance then.
My husband's family was very happy to hear the news. I don't usually get angry, but when I heard those words, I lost my temper and went back to my parents' house. 3 years later, I received a call from my angry husband's family. It's too late for you to find out now. My name is Natalie. Ever since I was a little girl, I was chubby and the quiet type, so I found it difficult to get along with the people around me. I was often bullied and had no friends, so I spent most of my school days studying. In junior high school, I was bullied in such a way that the unpopular student had to confess his feelings to me and go out with me. Of course, I once tried to change myself by going on a diet, but no matter what I tried, it didn't work and I gave up. I tried all kinds of diets, but none of them seems to work. I tried things like supplements with the money I earned from my part-time job, but they all failed. At home, my mother was divorced and she was raising me as a single mother, so I could not talk to her about my problems at school. I did not want to cause unnecessary worry to my mother, who was doing her best to raise me by herself. She would ask me about school, but I would always lie and say that I was having a good time with my friends. However, I was able to get pretty good grades, probably because I worked so hard on my studies in such an environment. With this, I might be able to get a good job and repay my mother. Thinking that, I desperately went to job interviews at famous companies. I eventually got a job offer from one of those famous companies and started working right after graduating from college. I made some good friends at the company, started living on my own while I sent money home to my mother. 3 years after I joined the company, I was asked to go to a group blind date for the first time in my life. There, I met my current husband, Logan Lopez, who was a handsome man. Logan is the opposite of me, as he was the mood maker at the blind date and popular with the girls. In other words, if I'm the shadow, he is the light. Whenever I was asked about anything at the blind date, I would blurt out a simple answer and made sure I didn't stand out. I couldn't get used to the atmosphere, and halfway through blind date, I said I was going to get some fresh air and went out to the restaurant. While I was taking in the nice air, Logan came up to me there and we had a conversation. This is how I met my husband. I heard girls keeping an eye on me from that day on, but I wasn't afraid because Logan was there and he protected me. Not many years after we started dating, we got married and Logan became my husband. But I had no idea at the time that our days of happiness would turn into a nightmare.
Excuse me, Natalie. I've always told you to finish cleaning by morning, haven't I? It's impossible to work efficiently with a body like that. My mother-in-law, who is sarcastic, and my sister-in-law, who makes fun of me. These two people never get bored of making offensive remarks to me every day. Since I got married, I have been living with my husband and mother-in-law, and I pay for all the living expenses and utilities. My sister-in-law comes to visit our house occasionally to make fun of me. Our house is newly built, which I bought for a happy married life with my husband. It is the opposite of the happy life I had envisioned though. My husband does not pay for anything related to our living, and he comes home late at night. Even though he was aware of what my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were saying to me, he never showed any signs of helping me, unlike when we dated. Ever since we got married,
My life has been like this every day. Perhaps because of this stress, my health has not been so good recently. I was sluggish, feverish, sometimes had difficulty breathing, and was frequently anemic, which was terrible. But every time I asked my mother-in-law about going to the hospital, she always said the same thing.
You can't take care of yourself because of your sloppy figure. Do you really need to go to the hospital?
I was treated the same way at home as when I was a student, even at my age. It is very hard to find a place and time to rest in the house I live in. My husband, who used to always help me, has now joined my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's side. There is no place for me anymore. I thought that every day, so I didn't dare to rebel. I spent money, worked, and lived for my husband's family, not for myself. I realized along the way that he had married me as a money grabber because my salary was very good. I was honestly angry, but I didn't have the courage to divorce him and go back to my parents' house, so it has stayed this way. Even though I knew that my husband was involved with several women and that my mother-in-law had a gambling habit, I pretended to ignore it. I had all the evidence I needed just in case, but my lack of courage prevented me from revealing it. However, if the opportunity arose, I would be able to proceed smoothly with this evidence. With that in mind, I kept the evidence in a safe place. The stress of my daily life continued to increase day by day, and I finally collapsed at work. I found myself in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm. I did not know why I was in the hospital. Soon after I woke up, a nurse came to me, followed by my doctor.
Are you feeling alright?
Yes, I'm fine.
Have you felt any physical discomfort anywhere recently? Tiredness or nausea, for example?
In response to my doctor's question, I tell him that I had been sluggish, feverish, sometimes had difficulty breathing, and was frequently anemic. The doctor told me that I would be kept in the hospital for a few days and left. The nurse said that after I collapsed at work, my boss found me right away and called an ambulance. The people at work have been very good to me, so I must thank them later. But to be honest, I was kind of glad I didn't have to go home while I was in the hospital. No mother-in-law to nitpick and be sarcastic every day, and no sister-in-law to badmouth me. That night, I had a good night's sleep for the first time in years. However, I had a bad cough at the breakfast and did not feel very comfortable. Just the day after I was brought to the hospital, I began to notice more and more discomfort in my body, and I talked to my doctor about it. The doctor said he would extend my hospital stay and do a detailed examination. At this time, I had no idea what was happening to my body. 2 days later, when the tests were to take place, I began to feel my muscles weaken. The doctor told me that I should stay in the hospital for a month. I hadn't contacted anyone yet, but thought I should tell my family, so I decided to call home.
Hello?
Hello, this is Natalie. I'm calling because I'm actually going to be in the hospital for a month.
Oh, really? It's so peaceful without you. Take care. Just please make sure to do the usual payments.
My mother-in-law answered the phone and immediately hung up with only that when I told her I was going to be in the hospital. Well, I expected this, so I was not surprised. While being sarcastic, she asked me to make sure I paid the bills. I wondered what they would do if I didn't pay the rent, utilities, and other bills. I also happened to find out in the process of cleaning up the house that my mother-in-law actually owed a lot of money. She had been putting off the repayment of that debt for so long. that it had gotten to the point where she asked me to make the payment. It was shortly after we got married, so she wasn't that bad. But after I promised to make this payment, her attitude changed drastically. Looking back, I really wonder why I made that promise. However, not knowing what she would say if I rebelled now, and not having the courage to rebel either, I had no choice but to listen to my mother-in-law. Then, 2 weeks after I was hospitalized, my doctor came to my room.
Good morning, Miss Lopez. I'm here to tell you the result of the test.
Thank you very much. How are they?
It is a very serious matter, but you have cancer.
For a moment, my thoughts stopped. It would be hard to accept being told out of the blue that I had cancer. However, I had to accept it considering the sudden abnormality in my body. A real disease is where a healthy body gets worse and worse. At first, I thought it was just fatigue or a cold, but the true name of a disease cannot be determined without an examination. No one would know. The doctor told me that I had already reached a critical point, that I should expect to live only a few years, roughly 2 at the most. That's what I was told. 2 years to live. That sounds like a very long time, but it is very short. What shall I do now? That might be the first thought of those who have been told their life expectancy. In my case, I regretted my life first. I was harassed and ridiculed for a long time because of my body shape, but I was blessed with a good job. I thought I met someone nice and that it would change my life, but that was short-lived. I had more problems I had to face at home, and my life was the same as before. My life is too painful to tell. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Can I stay at home for the rest of my life?
As long as you come to the hospital regularly and take your medicine every day, that would be possible.
The doctor allowed me to stay at home, so I was returned home in a few days. But I had to tell my family that I had been told I only had few years to live. Even my mother-in-law, who had been so rude to me, would probably be a little worried about me. I made a phone call thinking that, but of course, that never happened. I have to tell you, I have been diagnosed with cancer and have only 2 years to live.
Yay! I will get life insurance then. I have to think about what I'm going to buy with that.
What? My mother-in-law seemed very happy to hear that I had so little time left to live. My sister-in-law, who was listening from behind, was also so pleased that I could hear it from the other end of the phone. Why don't these people have even a piece of a good heart? And then I heard my husband's voice, which sounded like he must have just returned.
Hey, you are home. Natalie said she has only 2 years to live.
Seriously?
My husband, whom I thought married out of love for each other, laughed about it too. Why did I fall in love with such a person? Many things were going round and round in my head. I had reached my limit. The moment I felt that, my blood rushed to my head, and for the first time, I snapped. Your relative has been given a life expectancy. How can you people react like that? For your information, I will not returning home from now on.
You don't have to come back, but make sure you pay the bills, okay?
I am left with silence in the quiet hospital phone space. Tears welled up in my eyes as I still held the phone to my ear. I felt frustrated, strained, and sad. These emotions were flooding my eyes. I wondered if this is how families are supposed to be. Why do I always end up like this? I must change. I can't be the same as I am now. I went from feeling sad to feeling like I finally had a chance to change. I had always listened to what others said and had never been able to move forward because I didn't have confidence in myself. If I don't change now, I will just repeat these bad memories forever. By expressing my anger toward others for the first time, I finally started to move forward. I will change. With this, I returned to my parents' house on the day I was discharged from the hospital. I'm home. Mom, I'm sorry I came home. I was about to cry when I saw my mother's face. She hugged me slowly and welcomed me back home. She's my favorite, most trusted, and respected person. I was crying, but I told her what had happened at home and explained every detail. I also told her that after I collapsed at work, I was hospitalized, and after tests, I had only 2 years to live. My mother was shocked and saddened by the news. However, she strongly told me to have hope for life and not to give up. I intend to move forward so that I have no regrets. But of course, I don't want to end my life in 2 years. I have packed all the evidence of my husband's family, his affairs, and my mother-in-law's debts in my hospital bag. I am glad I was vigilant about these things because they could have been thrown away while I was gone. My mother also seems to be willing to help me consult with lawyers and others, so we decided to work out the sequence of events and what to tell them beforehand. And then, there was a life insurance they were so happy about. I looked it up on the internet and found out that it is possible to change the beneficiary. So I decided to make my mother the beneficiary of this insurance. Since I have no children, this would be the best way. And from the next day, I was busy. After a while, I returned to work and spent time with my mother and friends, making the most of each day. In the meantime, I did not hear from my husband's family, which probably means that they too are spending their time now. I realized that 3 years had already passed. I had 2 years to live, but I continued to go to the hospital and take my medicine without forgetting, and I was able to live this long. The symptoms of my cancer are under control, and my body is recovering to the surprise of the doctor. I wonder what would happen after I was told you didn't have long to live, but I'm happy for you, Natalie. And you look so beautiful, my mother said, smiling at me with tears in her eyes. While I have been busy since then, I've also done a good job of improving myself because I knew I had to change. Because I was living a healthy life without stress from my husband and family, I succeeded in losing weight and changed so drastically that it was hard to tell who I was. Even at work, people were talking about how much I had changed, and I was well prepared with my lawyer. Suddenly, the phone rings. The caller is my husband.
What are you doing right now? Our house is in a lot of trouble. What happened to the insurance money?
My husband calls me and starts talking about debt collectors coming to their house and complaining about the fact that electricity and gas were cut off today. He says that his mother has a headache because of the debt collectors, and then she has been lying to them that the debt was created by me. Why should I care about the people who have been laughing at me?
What the hell?
My husband sounds a mixture of surprise and anger at my aggressive remarks, and from his point of view, I guess he wants to say,
Who do you think you are when I went to the trouble of taking you in when you didn't have anyone to take care of you?
In the past, I would have been scared to death the moment my husband called me, but I'm not like that anymore. Also, I won't pay the rent for you anymore. If you don't move out of the house by the end of the day, you will be evicted.
You!
My husband snapped at me on the phone, but then I hear my sister-in-law getting angry from far away as well. I had him put the phone on speaker and explain from the beginning to end about the debt, about my husband's affair, and the numerous ways they have harassed me. I tell my husband's family everything I had never been able to tell them. My husband and sister-in-law listened to what I had to say and didn't say anything after that. They probably had nothing they could say back. And all of this had already been discussed with a lawyer, and that the lawyers would soon go to my husband to proceed with the divorce.
Natalie, I'm sorry for everything I have done, so please forgive me. I can't do anything without you.
It's too late to realize that now. Besides, it's my money that you need, not me, right?
That's not true. The truth is that I was grateful, but my mother and sister threatened me.
My sister-in-law snapped at my husband when she heard that statement. Even I could tell right away that the statement was a lie. I was amazed at how he could lie without hesitation. I'm sure my husband will get the cold shoulder from his family after I'm done talking. My in-laws were a mess. This is what they deserved. Nothing you can say will change my mind. Please proceed with the divorce with my lawyer.
Natalie.
I pressed the end call button. My fingers were trembling, and I feel my strength drain from my body all at once. For the first time, I have the courage to take the first step toward the person who has been harassing me and end things on my own. Tears well up in my eyes as I realize that I have done so. My mother is right there beside me as I was talking on the phone. She hugged me and praised me for my hard work. Her kindness filled my heart, and I cried in my mother's arms. The tears were not tears of sadness, but tears of joy that I had changed. It was clear to me that at this moment, I was no longer the same person I was before, and my consciousness faded away as I left these words behind. Thank you, Mother. I woke up 3 days later. My body was equipped with various machines, and thanks to the oxygen mask, I could barely breathe, but I could not speak. I kind of understood the situation and overheard my mother and the doctor, who was sitting near my bed.
This is probably her last moment.
Thank you for everything you have done, doctor.
Oh, I'm close. I was calm, as if I knew.
Natalie, you've worked so hard. You did great.
She looked with pain in her eyes as she squeezed my hand as hard as she could and patted me on the head. I wanted to say something to her, but the hardest part was that I couldn't even do that. I couldn't even move my body freely anymore. I wanted to express my gratitude directly to my mother, who was closest to me and helped me in so many ways.
Natalie, after that, we were able to get a divorce for you. It was because you worked so hard.
My mother tells me many stories as she cries, but even her words are becoming more and more distant from me. I can only hear the sound of a machine surrounding me. I felt my consciousness fading away, and I knew it was the end. I squeezed my mother's hand back with my last bit of strength, and I mouthed, "Thank you." God gave me a chance to change, and I properly accomplished that chance. So I don't have a single regret. If there's a next life, I would like to live as myself again.
What? I can't believe it. A wife trying to use her husband's parents' bathroom? That's unbelievably rude. This is why I don't like those brought up by single parents.
Since we got married, I have been trying to find out what my mother-in-law doesn't like about me, to the point where I could say that her hobby is bullying me. My mother-in-law has been bothering me a lot in this way. When I widened my eyes at the ridiculous comment about wives not being allowed to use the bathroom, she said,
"Well, now that you know that, just go outside and do it. If you don't make it in time, you will be the one in trouble, right?"
I left the house with a smile on my face, thinking it was her head that was unbelievable. 3 hours later, there she was in front of me.
No! Stop, please!
I saw my mother-in-law desperately pleading with tears in her eyes. My name is Willow, a 30-year-old office worker. My husband Robert and I got married just a few months ago, after 3 years of dating. I would like to say that our marriage is smooth sailing, but in fact, it is not. I have no complaints about my husband, and he's very supportive of doing the housework. The problem lies with my mother-in-law, who lives outside of the state. When I decided to get married, my married friends advised me that no matter how kind my mother-in-law seems, there will always be problems with them. So I was prepared for it to some extent. However, my mother-in-law was far crazier than I had imagined. About a month after we got married, we came home from work and found someone sitting in front of our front door. Who is that? What if it's a prowler? No one was scheduled to visit us that day, so we were contemplating on whether to talk to the management company or call the police. As we were wondering, the person noticed us and called out,
You are so late! How many hours do you think I waited here?
It was only then that we realized that the person approaching us was my husband's mother.
What? Why are you here, Mom? If you are coming, you should call me. It's common sense.
My husband scolded my mother-in-law for showing up without any notice, but she dodged his rebuke.
Let me in now that you've come home. I'm completely chilled under the cold weather.
As soon as she said this, I became impatient. Please, could you give us a minute? It's a little messy right now. But my mother-in-law ignored my words and pushed me out of the way and made her way into the room without permission.
Oh my, what is this? I don't know how you could make the room this messy.
My mother-in-law exclaimed when she saw our slightly messy house. I blushed from embarrassment. My husband Robert was quick to respond.
There's no need to shout. It's not even that messy. It's the busiest season of the year at our company, and Willow and I are both tired these days. We both decided that we'll do all the cleaning on our days off. Besides, it's none of your business, is it?
My husband said, scratching his head as he headed for the bathroom. As he said, we've been working hard lately and had just come home that day with takeout. My mother-in-law glanced at the back and sighed.
I guess a child raised in a home without a mother is no good. Housework is an important part of being a wife. How can you not know that?
My mother-in-law's words hurt me. My mother passed away when I was very young, and my father was the one who raised me. I remember the negative expression on my mother-in-law's face when she found out about it when our families first met. She talked about housework all the time, as if she had completed her image of me as a woman who could not do housework. At that time, I couldn't help but just smile at her stuffy comments. Eventually, my husband and father-in-law helped me out of the situation by warning her that it was rude for saying that to a person who had just met. But at the end,
Willow get hot-tempered sometimes, probably because she was raised by only her father. However, she is a good cook, much like my late wife. Please, I ask you to take it easy on her.
My father said jokingly, while smiling and laughing, but I'm sure he was frustrated. That night, my father sent me a message saying,
Don't give in.
Fortunately, my father-in-law was a kind man, and my husband was always on my side. I didn't like my mother-in-law, but I didn't have the option to reconsider my marriage. After that, my mother-in-law continued to visit us at home without any notice. Each time she did, my husband's lightning struck.
You don't have to be shy just because it's in front of Willow.
She thought that my husband was embarrassed like an adolescent boy in junior high school. How positive could she be? I couldn't help but to ask myself every time. The third time, my husband snapped and called his father on the spot. Apparently, my mother-in-law had told him that she was going to stay at a friend's house, and he never thought she would be at our house.
Put your mother on the phone right away.
My father-in-law told my husband this, and my mother-in-law seems to be scolded again over the phone. After this incident, my mother-in-law's unannounced visits stopped, but now I began to receive frequent phone calls. She would ask me what I was going to cook for dinner tonight, or whether I had vacuumed the house, and so on. I was quite annoyed at her intrusion into my private life. She also asked me about my income, and whether she was making fun of my father for working even after he retired. She also asked me about my father's income and savings. My mother-in-law was not afraid to ask me things that even our relatives wouldn't normally ask, no matter how close they were. Of course, I had no obligation to answer. I wonder how much. I just fake smiled and got through it. Although she was asking me so many unnecessary questions, my mother-in-law didn't talk much about herself. I remember a similar girl when I was a student. She was a gossip monger and took pleasure in the misery of others. It took a lot of energy to deal with her, so I reduced the number of times I answered the phone to once every 2 calls, then once every 3. Eventually, I started answering the phone every 5 times. Then, when I didn't answer the phone, she started blasting her little complaints to me into my voicemail.
Don't get carried away, even though you're just a wife. You know, kids who don't have their mothers by their side don't grow up to have any common sense. I can see it in your father. He looks like he has a low income and uneducated. And of course, you're the same too.
I didn't deserve to be told this much, just because I didn't answer the phone. In short, my mother-in-law hates me. If that's the case, I don't like her either. I don't care if she talks bad about me, but I don't allow her to talk bad about my father. We don't even have to get along. Fortunately, we live pretty far from each other, so I will keep a reasonable distance from her. I was still thinking that way at the time, but I had no idea that a few months later, I would find myself in such a situation. When the end of the year approached, I contacted my father and talked about which family to visit for the holidays.
I have to work at the end of the year, so I probably won't be able to go home. It's the first holiday since you got married, right? Wouldn't your mother-in-law be annoyed if you didn't go back to Robert's parents' house?
When my father said that, I thought to myself, that's true too. Thus, I made my first trip to my parents-in-law's house. When I arrived, my mother-in-law greeted us with a smile. However, the moment my husband entered the house, she shut the door. I was stunned, still standing outside.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you,
says mother-in-law, who opened the door with a smirk on her face. It's no big deal. I smiled back at her.
Oh, I see. The Carter's family hasn't arrived yet.
Carter is Robert's brother, who is 2 years younger than him. He has a wife named Maya. In fact, Carter and Robert got married respectively at almost the same time, so their mother was quite upset at the beginning of the marriage because her beloved sons got married all at once. Maya, my sister-in-law, is a lovely, quiet girl, the type of girl I, even as a woman, would want to protect. While waiting for my brother-in-law and his wife to arrive, my mother-in-law and I began preparing the meal in the kitchen. She didn't seem to be amused by my surprisingly skillful movements.
Well, it's normal to be able to do this much. The important thing is the taste.
She seems to be upset at my lukewarm answers to that.
You really aren't worth a lovable wife.
She sat down on the chair with a thump and mumbled to herself.
It's driving me crazy. My son is taken by you, and there's nothing to look forward to when living alone with my husband. The chatterbox neighbor next door, I don't know if she has a new grandchild or what, but her bragging is just annoying.
I didn't want to be in the same space anymore with my mother-in-law, who has nothing but bad things to say about other people whenever she opens her mouth. I should go to the bathroom to escape this. I'm going to the bathroom. Please look over the pot. Then, my mother-in-law stood in the doorway as I was about to leave the kitchen. What is it? I was puzzled, and my mother-in-law grinned at me with a sickening smile.
What? I can't believe it. A wife trying to use her husband's parents' bathroom. That's unbelievably rude. This is why I don't like those brought up by single parents.
I didn't understand her words, and it simply confused me. You say single parent every time you open your mouth, but I have never been ashamed of being raised by a single parent. I think you should stop thinking like that, because it's quite rude as a person. Perhaps infuriated by my attitude, she finally grabbed my arm as I was leaving the kitchen.
I don't care what you say. I can't let an outsider use our bathroom. Well, now that you know that, just go outside and do it. If you don't make it in time, you will be the one in trouble, right?
She even told me to go to a park nearby, so I just ran out of the house. When I returned to my parents' house a few minutes later, I heard arguing from the back of the room.
Carter, what nonsense are you saying? What do you mean you're cutting me off?
Shouting, my mother-in-law's eyes were on my brother-in-law and his wife.
Why don't you understand? I mean exactly what I said. You have been nasty to Maya. Did you think I didn't know anything? I came here today to cut you off.
I could see the strong will in my brother-in-law's eyes as he glared at her.
Not only to Robert's place, but to Carter's place. Really, how much time do you have on your hands?
My father-in-law was furious, and my mother-in-law scurried around looking for an ally. But of course, there was not a single such person in the room. As if to push further, Robert, who had noticed me, asked me where I had been. Oh, me? Your mother was very adamant about not using the bathroom in this house, so I barely made it. In contrast to my laughing, my mother-in-law's face turned pale, and her family member's face turned red and furious.
No, I will never say such a foolish thing. You really are a bad person, Willow. How could you lie like that?
Obviously, I was not going to play along with my mother-in-law's action, so I reached into my pocket.
Well, now that you know that, just go outside and do it. If you don't make it in time, you will be the one in trouble, right?
What echoed in the quiet room was the exuberant voice of my mother-in-law. And so, I would never say, what was that again? I stood in front of my mother-in-law and pulled out the voice recorder I had in my pocket. When I got married, I received advice from many of my friends. I heard that there are nice mother-in-law in the world, but very rarely, there are those who develop dementia only towards their wives. What they said yes to yesterday becomes no the next day. I even had a friend who referred the voice recorder as a bride-to-be's tool, so I took her advice. My mother-in-law was gritting her teeth, looking quite chagrined. Then the intercom rang.
Oh my, we have a visitor. Look, let's put this conversation to rest.
Perhaps thinking it was a chance to change the subject, she stood up and hurried to the front door. However, when she didn't seem to come back, we also went to the front door.
No, I didn't mean to.
My mother-in-law was having an argument with a woman around the same age as her. Then, the other woman noticed us.
There she is, Robert's wife. When you came to my house earlier, you forgot your handkerchief, so I came to give it to you.
I quietly approached her. Oh, thank you so much for your help earlier. I almost didn't make it in time. I accepted the handkerchief from the neighbor with a smile. Next to her, my mother-in-law's face was paler than before. The neighbor then glared at my mother-in-law.
I was surprised when your daughter-in-law came to my house to use the bathroom. You should be nicer to your daughter-in-law, you know. Your son's wife is the best thing for your son once he's married. Well, maybe it's too late for the warning, though.
The neighbor snickered at my mother-in-law and went back to her house. My mother-in-law glared at me.
Why did you go to the Chatterbox house out of all the houses? I told you to go to the park. Tomorrow, the whole town will be talking about it.
When she told me to go to the park bathroom, I went straight to the neighbor's house without hesitation. What was on my mind at that time? Neighbor, Chatterbox neighbor. My feelings were bouncing. It seems that the relatives of the house next door were gathered too, and I could hear them enjoying themselves so much, even from outside. I rang the intercom, wishing I could have spent my time happily like that. A woman answered and asked who I was. I'm sorry to bother you so suddenly. I'm Willow, the wife of the eldest son next door. Could you please let me use your bathroom? They saw my face like I was about to cry and kindly let me into their house. When the neighbors heard what had happened, they were quite indignant and said that it was unbelievable. I forgot my handkerchief on purpose, of course.
We came home today to break off our relationship.
Robert, my husband, opened his mouth. The mother-in-law looked up, shocked that her too beloved son had told her that they were cutting her off. She looked as if it was the end of the world.
Because I couldn't be helped. I missed you so much. You should at least understand how your mother feels.
My mother-in-law cried out and went to her room. Her childish behavior made everyone in the room speechless. Feeling sorry to leave our father-in-law alone, I finished up cooking with Maya, and we sat around the table to enjoy the food. Perhaps envious of the laughter, my mother-in-law finally came out of her room.
Willow, Maya, I thought to myself, from now on, we will be a family and we will get along without any secrets.
At my mother-in-law's words, my in-laws' faces froze up and Maya looked frightened. I don't know what my mother-in-law was thinking, but I responded, No secrets, I see. I'm actually hiding something even from Robert as well. Seeing me so excited, my mother-in-law thought she had been accepted.
What? You can't keep things between married couples, you know. Come on, talk to me.
With that, I put my phone on the desk. Robert, I haven't told you this, but your mother and I are on the phone quite a bit. I've been so busy with work lately that I don't get to pick up the phone very often. But you see, your mother always leaves me a message. Contrary to my family members who listen carefully, my mother-in-law's face turns pale again and screams,
No! Stop! Stop, please!
My father-in-law told her to shut up, and the only she could do was to hide her face. The room was filled with the abusive words towards me and the insults towards my father. When I finished playing everything, everybody was shaking from anger.
Hey, you! Get out of this house right now!
My mother-in-law, perhaps thinking she had no excuse, burst into tears and pleaded to her husband that she did not want a divorce. Carter, Maya, Robert, and I got up and headed for the front door. My mother-in-law rushed after us and said, "Please, I apologize, so please forgive me." By then, she looked like a monster with her makeup ruined. If you're going to cry, you shouldn't have bullied your daughter-in-law in the first place. Then again, my father does work, but it's not for lack of money. He is a board member of a company, so I think he has some money. But don't you think that's none of your business? Hearing my words, my mother-in-law fell silent. On the car ride home,
I'm sorry, Willow. Because I talked to you about it, I guess I kind of dragged you into it.
a few days ago, Maya had asked me for advice. The subject was, of course, the bullying of the mother-in-law. Maya, who is very sensitive, was pale and neurotic. When I heard about them thinking of cutting her off, I discussed it with my husband, and we decided to do that as well. "What are you apologizing for? It's not your fault at all." Maya was probably more hurt than I was. I was rather glad that she talked to me about it. Actually, I had already told my father-in-law about what we were thinking, and he said he would decide whether to get a divorce or not after seeing her behavior. It seems that my mother-in-law's behavior that day was decisive enough for a divorce, and a few days later, my father-in-law informed me about it. My mother-in-law's parents had already passed away, so with no one to rely on and no money to move far away, she had no choice but to remain in her hometown. It looks like she started working part-time, but the story about her had already spread within the small town. What? She wouldn't let her daughter-in-law use the bathroom? How did she do something so stupid? They gossiped about her, and she became completely isolated at work. And soon she quit her job and moved to another one. She got what she deserved, and she will regret it for the rest of her life. My father-in-law sold his house and moved near ours. My brother-in-law and his wife also live nearby, so the five of us often get together and spend our time happily around the dinner table. My father also comes to visit occasionally, and he and my father-in-law have become such good friends that they call each other by their first names. When I was a little girl, I sometimes felt lonely on days when my father came home late from work. But now, I see my loving husband and his family having a good time in front of me. As I watch them with a smile on my face, I sincerely reflect on the happiness I feel today